Hi friends, thanks for joining me for class today. We are going to be looking at tropical botanical journaling. So I'd love to introduce you to this. I love using tropical botanicals in my own journal. It fits in with my home environment, but also I think it's a nice way to incorporate maybe a look back at your favorite tropical vacation or your last trip to Miami, if you're doing some memory journaling or just planning for an upcoming trip. A couple quick notes on the materials before we get started. I'll do a quick overview. Of course, I know that you already got a materials list, but the materials list is kind of an either or. I'm going to show you a technique where we'll use Tombow dual brush pens, and then another technique where we will use gouache. This is a regular gouache, not acrylic gouache. This is more like a watercolor where you can add water to it, bring it to a milky consistency, let it dry, and then when it dries, you can actually reuse it. So it's a really nice material if you're not familiar with it. Okay, now let's get started. Okay, we're gonna take a look at materials now. Really quick, we went over these Tombows before. I mentioned that we're going to look at two different ways to do this project. One with the Tombows, that is a 451, a 443, and a 373 in case you're into those numbers. Also, we're going to use washi tape, scissors, you need your journal. I mentioned I'm pretty partial to the Archer and Olive one. We'll get back to that in a second. Also, for the gouache painting, you're going to need water, a little palette of some type, or a plate. The actual gouache paints, those are Winsor & Newton, and a round number 2, number 4, number 8, somewhere in there. One of those sized paintbrushes. The smaller one that I have there is kind of old, and that's okay. You also need the scrap pieces of paper, that's what the green things are up there on the right, and a paper towel. So getting back to the paper, you can use a journal, any journal you want. Like if you like using a watercolor journal, use that. This is a Bristol board journal. I'm partial to the Archer and Olive dot journal because I like the 160 GSM pages. I think that they are really thick enough to do some mixed media journaling in. It holds up very well under the weight of a little bit of water and paint. But again, you do you with your journal. All right, a little bit of background. What we are drawing is tropical botanicals. So what I'm talking about specifically in this instance is palm trees and palm fronds. Okay, you've seen one palm frond, palm tree, whatever. You've seen them all. No, not true. There are 2,600 different palms, and that's just way too many. But it also means that we have some leeway when it comes to drawing palms. So what are we talking about here when we're talking drawing or painting palms? We have this wider part that comes off of the branch, or the trunk rather, and that part is called a leaf stalk. It's also referred to as a petiole. Okay, here, let me draw the main trunk of one of my 2,600 palms. So this part again is called the petiole. And then coming off of it is often a thinner part, but sometimes it's the same width as the petiole, and that is called the rachis. And you think of that as the spine, and from that spine middle part, all these leaves come off of it and hang down, and that's what kind of sways in the breeze. And those are called leaflets. Okay, so when we're talking about a palm tree and how it grows, again, here's this fun trunk of the tree, the main part of the tree, the brown part of the tree. And then out comes the petiole. Now, when a brand new branch or petiole rachis part comes out of the trunk, it grows straight up in a spike at the top, and then they start to sort of bow outward, and then they go outward again, and then they start bending downward, and then when they are straight up and down, they eventually die and fall off. And that's sort of the life cycle of each one of these leaf frond parts. Okay, so looking at drawing these, when you're looking at a palm tree, you kind of see these in multiple directions, kind of a straight on view like I just showed you there, and then sometimes more of a side view where all the leaflets look like they're falling down to one side, and it's sort of a exactly in profile view. So if you look at my hand, imagine my middle finger is the rachis, and then there's some of these leaflets, my index finger and my thumb are on one side, my ring finger and my pinky are on the other side. They kind of overlap like that. So if you want to think about drawing it, what's going to happen is they overlap. So some go on one side like this, and then the ones that are coming off the other side kind of go behind it and they crisscross. And when we're painting them, I'm telling you that it's okay to crisscross these. They're not going to look perfect. You're imagining some of this stuff kind of blowing the breeze. Also, sometimes they bend. They're not perfect. Mother Nature is not perfect. And in fact, if you draw it imperfectly, it looks a little bit more realistic than if you do a stylized version where all of these leaves line up like exactly, you know? So you have 2,600 different type of palm trees. So you have kind of artistic license to go in multiple directions. The leaflets can be short, long, kind of, you have a little bit of free reign. All right, going back to the Tombow pen, we're gonna grab a sheet of scrap paper and do some practice. You're gonna do this with the painting portion as well. So what you're gonna do is take the dual brush pen and you're gonna push down incredibly hard and get that thicker line, and then release as you go up. So now in one stroke, we're kind of taking care of the rachis and the petiole, which again, could be similar in size, could be the exact same size. Now, when you're doing this, I want you to turn your paper any way you want, whatever makes sense to you. I'm left-handed, obviously, so I find that pulling towards my hand works better. Some people like to pull towards their body, but push down and release and kind of let them start flying off. And if they're wavy, if it's shaky, that's okay, because that's how they really look. So there's a whole bunch of these here. Going down to the end, you want to kind of extend it straight out and put a couple at the end. That's kind of how Mother Nature intends. All right, also, I'm going to do a couple of the crisscrossy ones. So I'm imagining now I'm drawing the other side. And they come out, they come out, they come out. And you can go in the same kind of direction or alternate. You can imagine that they're crisscrossing. Some of them would line up maybe even exactly. Okay, now I'm gonna grab a second color. I grabbed 3, but I'm gonna really quickly go through these and show you kind of what it looks like when you alternate and you put 3 different ones. Changing directions, playing around with how they look, maybe making one a smaller size, a bigger size. Use your scrap paper to practice this and see what you like. And also color combinations. I gave you these colors, but use whatever colors. And here's a closer view of that. Push down, and then slowly as you go, release it in motion. That's fun to practice. Okay, now let's take a look at the gouache technique with a paintbrush. And so these colors I have a pale rose blush, a permanent green, and a primary yellow. Again, it doesn't matter what kind of round paintbrushes you use. Watercolor brushes are the best, or mixed media. I've got a number 4 and a number 8 here, I think. And we're gonna mix this up into the palette. And again, when this dries, you can reuse it and re-wet it. Up on top there, I have some white left over from another project. And I'm gonna use the number 8. It's gonna make some really big leaflets, but it's fun to experiment and see what size you can make. Can you use a bigger brush and make smaller leaflets? We're gonna just kind of experiment with your scrap pieces of paper. And until you're really ready to go into your journal, you can use scrap paper to fill up a couple different pages. Especially if you're worried about maybe like ruining your journal or whatever. I don't think that's possible with this technique, but use your scrap paper to practice. And even check out the colors maybe that you want to be using. This is looking a little bit light to me, so I think for the layout I want to do with you, I want to make it a little bit darker. I might add some red to it and make it darker, but let's go ahead and try it out. You want it to be a cream or a thick milky consistency. Really mix it up well. You don't want it dripping off the brush. And then similar to what we did with the dual brush pen, you push down and then slowly release. And it's this whole push and lift technique. And it's actually very calming to do. And you can go back, make it thicker. I'm just adding a second layer to see if I really like this color. I love it, but I think for the effect that I'm going for, I need a darker color. But I'm gonna continue. This is making really big palm fronds. And I think maybe a little bit bigger than I would like. So maybe for my journal, I'm gonna use the number 4 round brush, maybe a number 2 round brush. So it doesn't matter how many of these leaflets come off the ricus. And then when you're doing a layout with it, you don't even have to include that petiole part. You could just have the leaflets sort of flowing. But while we're practicing, I want to practice making the entire palm. And again, like the other one, I'm going to turn this around, push down. Oh, I do not have enough water on here. So this is also a practice in consistency of your materials. This is very opaque, especially when you don't add enough water. It's extremely opaque. You don't want to paint with them right out of the tube. You want to mix it with about 50% water to get a nice consistency, and so that it'll flow right off your paintbrush. This is a beautiful, rich green. I've sort of mixed that permanent green color with the pale rose and a little bit of white. But I think, again, I want this color to be even lighter. So you see how they kind of get wispy. It almost gives the appearance that the leaflet has split in two, which totally happens sometimes. So again, I think that color is a little bit lighter than I want, and the green color is a little bit darker than I want, but I can play around with my palette. You can pick whatever colors make you feel happy. They don't have to be green at all for this type of a layout. Okay, finally, we are gonna take a look at the journal. This is an A5 size journal. I'm going to walk you through doing a weekly journal, which I do a vertical layout where I've identified 6 days, and then I split that last column into 2 for the weekend. You can split it up any way you want. And what I'm gonna do is mask off the area where I would be drawing and writing about each day. So I'm identifying an area that's 7 squares wide by about 16 squares tall, and I'm masking it off with the washi tape. So all you do is set it down and then go back and trim off the edges. And I'm kind of speeding this up because it's a little bit boring to watch, but also it's incredibly painful to kind of watch me do it because I'm left-handed and scissors are never my friend. So you're gonna carefully trim these off, do this 6 times over, and then complete it. And when you paint over it or you draw over it with marker, it completely stays white. So you're gonna do that 6 times over. Okay. Now here's my little cheat, is I actually cut these out with my cutting machine out of a washi sticker paper, and it's cut to 1.375 by 3.125 inches. And I put these down, and also by doing it this way instead of the washi tape way, it's a little bit less distracting for you to watch me create this layout. Now we're gonna use 2 scrap pieces of paper. You can use the same paper that you used to practice before, and just tuck them up underneath your sheet. And that's not to prevent bleed through, because if you're using a journal with thick enough pages, nothing's going to bleed through. Those pages aren't going to warp at all. It's just going to stay nice. We are going to be doing a layout that goes right to the edge. Okay, so we're going to come up from the bottom for most of this. And an alternate idea to this, if you didn't want to mask things off with washi and mess with all of that, you could just come up from the bottom and do these palm fronds just from the bottom and cover the bottom portion of your page with a fun little design. But we're gonna cover the whole page. So yeah, we're gonna cover the whole page, and we're gonna have all these palm fronds sort of start from the bottom of the page and go up and outwards. So whatever colors that you've chosen to use, you want to start with the lightest color first, and we're gonna paint the palm fronds to cover in sort of a uniform manner. And by that I mean, if you're gonna do 2 on the right side, you're gonna put 2 on the left side. If you're gonna put 3, you put 3 on the other side. And then we want them all to maybe kind of look like they're coming from one tree. So, or multiple trees, each one color. So for these, I'm having all of the leaflets kind of fall to one side. And this, they're kind of pointing upward. And now I want to come sort of outward with the next one. And don't be afraid to cross in the middle. That way when you're looking back on this, it almost looks like it's one sheet of paper. And changing up the size is fine too. Now this one is coming out a little bit bigger. They could all be the exact same size. Some could be smaller, some could be larger. And the paper is there, as you can see, to go right off the page. So this looks totally natural, totally organic, and I don't have any edge to this. It's not some pattern. It's gonna flow right off the page maybe. And now finally I'm kind of swaying in the opposite direction. So you do want to think about having some balance, not having everything go the exact same way. Sorry, my hand is in the way. When you do this, again, I encourage you to turn your page, and if it's more comfortable to pull it towards you, do that. If it's more comfortable to pull away from you, do that. I'm leaving it in one direction so that I don't appear to keep spinning my paper around and around and around. It just looks better. I'm trying to not annoy you. Okay, so I'm gonna put maybe one more in here, I think, for this yellow color. And then maybe we'll speed it up a bit afterwards for the next color. But as you can see, these things that are happening in mine are totally okay. I've got sort of a lighter color that came out, and then I'm covering it up a second time, and then that color's darker. You just want to make sure that you're not coming up with any pools of water or paint, because oversaturating this page, it's still paper, it's not the thickest paper ever, so you want to make sure that you're not oversaturating this, because then it will start to buckle and wrinkle up as it's drying. And let's go off the page this way. Oh, I like that. And a little crisscross. So now I've got one that's kind of touching another. And I've got a little extra water. I want to pick that up with my paintbrush. So some of them are going this way, some that way. I haven't painted any that are straight on like that, like, you know, like looking at the palm of your hand. Again, I'm going to speed it up and start adding another color. You don't necessarily have to clean off your paintbrush in between doing these. It's fun to overlap, and sometimes the colors will blend into one another. That's kind of fun too. At the end, I want to show you a couple more examples so that you see the different color patterns that I like to use. And here's a smaller one. I'm just gonna be quiet for a minute or two while you watch me sort of fill this in and come from different directions. And then you'll see I'm gonna add here. Oops, I really mixed up the color. It looks a little brown, but you know what? No accidents, just keep going. Once it dries, I'm gonna go over that a little bit more, I think. And then let's go into this, I think with some green. Yeah, I was initially thinking to stay away from the green color, but it's fun. Okay, so I do want to do at least one or two that has those leaflets coming off of both sides. So you sort of get that idea too. Not everything is swaying in the breeze. You sort of get that coming off both sides. And I'm coming from the top, but really I want to start there at the bottom and work my way to the end. And one more thing I want to make sure I incorporate is like portions of palms. So like peeking out here, you want just the tips of maybe another palm that was maybe a little bit shorter. And maybe I just want the petiole. So maybe a couple over there that are just that. And you don't see the rest. Oh, and I'm gonna go back and cover that. I was okay with it being brown, but now I'm kind of like wanting it to be green, you know? Okay, so remember we have the 6. This is still a journal page, so I've got those 6 days of the week. I want to put headers on top with the days of the week. So I'm just gonna go back into that yellow color and take a swipe across. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect square. It could be if you wanted to. Alternatively, you could use a paint pen. And that would be fun too, to have it opaque. If you swipe across it once, it might still be a little bit transparent. So you could wait for it to dry and go over it a second time. Okay, now here it is. This is the best part where we're gonna kind of reveal it and see what our design looks like. So I'm gonna set the paint aside, take my scrap pieces of paper away, and now that it's completely dry, obviously wait for it to dry, we're gonna peel away the washi tape. And in this case, my washi sticker paper. And see that completely white space underneath. And again, those voids in between where the leaves are, there's some negative space, some white space there. That would be fun for creating little doodles or drawings as well if you want to leave more white space. this is that big reveal, that satisfying tape peel. Okay, fun. So I've got 6 spaces. I typically use that last one and name it Saturday, Sunday. So if you follow me on Instagram at Missy Briggs, you know I'm always doing lettering. So I'm gonna do a little monoline lettering along with this class. I want to offer you a free download with different days of the week headers, lettering styles. So there should be a link somewhere that you can go to and grab that. And you can scan them, you can trace them. You can print them out on sticker paper and cut them apart and use them in your journal. And I'm just using a Micron 0.03. That's by Sakura. Any fine liner is great. I love these permanent and archival inks that I know over time won't fade. And again, that last day, a lot of times I do this like Saturday, Sunday. But I know a lot of people want their dedicated space for each day of the week. Okay, that's it. Also to note, I have this book, Easy Creative Lettering, and that is going to be your freebie days of the week. That's what that's gonna look like if you head over to that link and download it. This has been a really fun project. I'm so glad that you spent some time with me. Last, I want to talk for a second about the colors because there are so many ways to do this. Here are a couple examples of the color palettes that I've used to get this effect. So obviously a lot of these color palettes aren't traditional colors for palms, but you still get that sense of those deep tropical vibes. And just, it works with any color palette. Like, you kind of can't go wrong. That's why I really didn't want to lead you into a specific direction and get into the recipes for the colors that I'm using. I want to thank you again for joining me today, and I had a lot of fun doing this tropical botanical journaling with you. If you want more information or instruction, you can reach out to me at Missy Briggs on Instagram. You can also find me at missybriggs.com. Again, if you're interested in that download, there should be a link somewhere that you can reach out and get this days of the week download, as well as going online to wherever books are sold. I have a book, Easy Creative Lettering. Thanks again.